Cheap MIG welders promise a bargain, but most of the time they leave you with a weak arc, constant spatter, and a machine that quits the moment you try to step up from a hobby project to a real job. I've been there buying a low-cost unit, hoping it would handle a few repair jobs on my truck, only to find the output flicker, and the settings never quite match the thickness of the metal I'm working with. That's why I wanted to see if the JASIC 180A 5-in-1 welder actually feels like a smarter buy, or if it's just another budget gamble dressed up with more buttons. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I spent a good weekend setting this thing up in my garage, running it through a few typical scenarios. A 12-gauge steel panel for a fence repair, an inch pipe for a small fabrication project, and a thin 20-gauge sheet for a hobbyist art piece. I also swapped the power cord between a standard 120V outlet and a 230V circuit in the workshop to see how the dual voltage claim holds up. What I found was a machine that actually delivers what its headline 5-in-1 suggests, but with a few hidden trade-offs that matter if you're not just a weekend tinkerer. First off, the multi-process capability is the biggest selling point. You can run straight flux core without gas, classic MIG with external shielding gas, lifting for tighter control on thin metal, or even stick welding when you need to tackle rusty or dirty material. For someone like me, who jumps between a backyard fence repair and a small art project, that flexibility means I don't have to keep a rack of single-process welders cluttering the shop. The switch between modes is a simple selector knob, and the machine remembers the last setting, so you're not reconfiguring everything each time you change a job. The real test, though, is how the Synergic control handles the current matching. JASIC's marketing talks about a Synergic system that automatically adjusts voltage based on the wire feed speed you set. In practice, I found that when I set a 500 mm per minute feed speed for 12-gauge steel, the welder settled into a stable arc within a few seconds, and the bead was smooth with minimal spatter. When I dialed the feed down to 250 mm per minute for an inch pipe, the voltage automatically lowered, keeping the heat in a sweet spot that avoided burning through the metal. That kind of auto-adjustment saves you from constantly playing guess the right voltage, and is especially handy if you're not a seasoned welder. On the downside, the auto-adjust feature can be a little too eager on very thin sheet metal. When I dropped to 150 mm per minute on a 20-gauge sheet, the machine kept the voltage a tad higher than I'd like, leading to a shallow burn-through on the edges. I had to manually pull the voltage knob down a notch to get a clean bead. It's not a deal-breaker, but it means you still need to keep an eye on the arc, especially when you're working close to the limits of the material thickness. Power handling is where the dual voltage claim shows its value. On my 120V home outlet, the machine maxes out at about 150A of usable output, which is enough for most DIY tasks, but you'll feel the limitation when you try to weld thicker steel, say, an inch plate. Plugging it into a 230V circuit bumped the available amperage up close to the advertised 180A, and suddenly the same 12-gauge panel took a tighter, deeper penetration with less stick out on the wire. If you have a dedicated 230V line in your shop, you'll get the full punch the machine promises, otherwise, you're looking at a solid, but not industrial strength, performer. Safety features are understated, but worth mentioning. The welder includes built-in overcurrent protection that trips if you push the machine beyond its capacity. I tested this by deliberately feeding a heavy 2.5 mm wire at a high speed, and the unit shut down within a second, flashing an error code that reset automatically once the load dropped. That kind of safeguard is a relief for anyone who isn't constantly watching the amp meter like a hawk. Now, who should actually buy this thing? If you're a hobbyist who needs to dabble in several welding processes without buying a separate machine for each, the JASIC 180A is a practical middle ground. It's also a decent entry point for a small contractor, or a home-based metal fabricator, who doesn't have the budget for a full-size multi-process inverter, but still wants the flexibility to switch between MIG, TIG and stick. The dual voltage capability makes it future-proof if you ever upgrade your workshop's power infrastructure. Who should skip it? If you're a professional welder who spends a full day a week on inch or thicker material, you'll quickly feel the power ceiling on a 120V line and the occasional need to fine-tune the voltage on thin sheet. Also, if you rely heavily on pure TIG welding for precision work, a dedicated TIG machine with refined pulse control will outperform the lift-TIG mode in the JASIC. Finally, anyone